Rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the metal roof of the broken bus shelter, the sound echoing like 1,000 tiny hammers beating down on Sarah's spirit. The cold wind cut through her thin dress as if it weren't even there, stinging her skin and turning her fingertips numb. She pulled her daughter close, clutching Lily against her chest as tightly as she could, trying to give her warmth that she herself no longer had to give. Her breath came out in shaky clouds as she whispered, "Just a little longer, sweetheart, just until it stops." But she didn't believe her own words. She knew the rain wouldn't stop anytime soon. What she feared even more was the truth. She had nowhere to go even if it did. The city around them moved on without noticing, blurry headlights rushing past, tires slicing through puddles, drivers shielding themselves inside warm, dry cars. Not one of them slowed down, not one even glanced at the woman and child huddled beneath a flickering street lamp. Lily rubbed her little fists against her eyes, wiping away her mother's tears instead of her own. She always did that, always tried to be stronger than a child should ever need to be. Her tiny voice trembled from cold, but she spoke with surprising gentleness. "Don't cry, Mommy," she said softly, almost like a lullaby. "Maybe that man will help us." Sarah blinked through the blur of rain and exhaustion, following the direction of her daughter's pointing hand. A sleek black SUV had slowed as it approached the bus shelter, its deep headlights glowing like two cautious eyes in the storm. The vehicle didn't belong to this side of town, not even close. It was the kind of car she had only ever seen in pictures, or when it passed by with tinted windows and people who lived in a different world entirely. The door opened and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, protected from the rain only by an expensive gray suit that was quickly becoming soaked. He looked like someone out of a different life, confident posture, purposeful stride, the kind of man who made decisions and expected people to follow without question. Sarah's heart twisted painfully. She didn't want him to see her like this, ruined, defeated, a mother with no job, no home, no safety to offer her child. She wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to hide. Sarah hesitated at the edge of the bus shelter, the icy wind swirling around her like a warning. She didn't move immediately, not because she didn't want help, but because help felt dangerous. Help usually came with conditions, judgment, or disappointment. The world had not been kind lately, and Sarah had learned to protect herself even when she had no protection left to give. But Lily's tiny fingers squeezed hers, tugging her forward with innocent trust. "Mommy," she whispered, "he's nice, I know." Sometimes children saw truths adults were too wounded to recognize. That thought lingered in Sarah's mind as she took a cautious step forward. The man Daniel, as he would later introduce himself, opened the back door of the SUV, gesturing for them to get inside. The warmth spilling from the vehicle was overwhelming. Lily hopped in without hesitation, but Sarah paused, her instincts screaming at her to wait. Daniel noticed her hesitation. He didn't rush her, didn't insist. Instead, he stepped back, his hands raised slightly in a quiet gesture of reassurance. "You don't have to come if you don't want to," he said calmly. "But at least let your daughter get warm." Those words pierced her reluctance like a needle through cloth. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about Lily. Every decision Sarah made was for her. Every sacrifice. Every terrifying choice, so she stepped inside. Warmth washed over her instantly, thick, comforting, almost suffocating after nights spent in the unforgiving cold. Her breath shook as she exhaled, and she didn't realize she had been trembling until her muscles slowly began to relax. Daniel climbed in on the other side and shut the door. The rain outside became muffled, muted behind the thick insulated glass. Lily curled into the seat, wrapping her hands around the provided blanket as if it were treasure. The soft yellow interior lights cast a gentle glow on her small face, and Sarah felt something inside her chest loosen just a little. "Where are you taking us?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She hated how small she sounded. "To get a hot meal first," Daniel answered firmly. "You need to eat after that." He paused, as though making sure he didn't overwhelm her. "We'll figure things out." The phrase wasn't a promise, but it was enough. The SUV rolled through the city, raindrops streaking across the windows in silver lines. Sarah stared out, watching buildings blur past. The neon reflections on the wet streets created dancing colors that felt unreal, dreamlike. Daniel didn't speak for a while, and Sarah appreciated the silence. She wasn't ready for questions she couldn't answer. She wasn't ready to explain how she'd lost her job, how she'd been evicted after missing too many rent payments, how she'd begged every shelter only to be told they were full. When the car finally stopped, Sarah blinked in surprise. They weren't at some faceless chain restaurant or a cheap diner. They were standing outside a cozy, looking establishment with soft golden lights lining the windows and a small wooden sign that read, Hearth and Home Bistro. Daniel led them inside. Immediately, warmth and a comforting aroma enveloped them. Fresh bread, soup, roasted chicken. The restaurant staff froze slightly when they saw him, a mixture of respect and surprise in their expressions. Daniel simply nodded, guiding Sarah and Lily to a private corner booth. Within minutes, steaming plates were placed in front of them. Creamy soup, warm bread, tender chicken. Lily ate hungrily, spoon clinking against her bowl with childlike delight. Sarah, however, couldn't bring herself to touch the food at first. She stared at it, overwhelmed. It had been days since she had eaten more than scraps. Her stomach growled, but her mind was locked in disbelief. "You should eat," Daniel said gently. I'm just..." Sarah swallowed. "This is all so sudden, and you don't even know us." Daniel watched her for a moment, his gaze soft but heavy with meaning. "I know what it looks like when someone has run out of options," he said quietly. "Believe me, I recognize that look very well." Sarah frowned slightly, not understanding. He continued, "My mom and I lived in our car for almost a year when I was younger. I learned early that life can flip without warning." The revelation stunned her. A man like him, wealthy, powerful, successful, had once been where she was. Before Sarah could process it, Lily slid out from her seat and wrapped her tiny arms around Daniel's arm. "Thank you for helping Mommy," she said with innocent sincerity. Daniel's expression faltered, just for a second. Something raw flickered in his eyes. He rested his hand awkwardly on Lily's back and whispered, "Of course, sweetheart." The rain outside continued to fall, but inside the restaurant, something shifted. A spark of hope had begun to take root. When dinner ended, Daniel stood and said quietly, "I have an idea. Come with me." Sarah's breath caught again. "Where?" "To somewhere safe for the night," he said simply. "A place where you and Lily can rest." And this time, Sarah didn't hesitate as much. The warmth in his voice made the fear in her chest loosen its grip. Rain drizzled softly now, a thin whisper compared to the earlier storm, as the SUV rolled through quiet streets toward a gated property. Sarah stared out the window, her reflection faint against the glass. She watched as neighborhoods shifted, from worn-down buildings and flickering street lamps to wider roads, manicured hedges, and soft, glowing porch lights. Her heartbeat quickened with every passing mile. Lily had fallen asleep in the backseat, her teddy bear tucked under her chin, the rhythmic hum of the car lulling her into peaceful dreams. Sarah reached back and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, her hand trembling. How long had it been since Lily slept without shivering? How long had it been since Sarah herself slept without fear gnawing at her chest? Daniel glanced at her from the driver's seat. Not the kind of glance that judges or questions, just a quiet, checking glance, like someone making sure she hadn't withdrawn completely into herself. She still felt hesitant, still unsure, but something about his presence steadied her. When the SUV rolled to a gentle stop, Sarah gasped. Before them stood a tall gate that slowly swung open after Daniel tapped a keypad hidden beneath a light. The pathway beyond was lined with soft garden lamps illuminating raindrops suspended on leaves, making everything glow like a dream. As the car crept through, Sarah's fear flared. We can't stay here," she whispered instinctively. The sight of the elegant property felt too far from the world she belonged to. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He drove forward until the SUV stopped in front of a smaller house beside a larger mansion. A cozy guest house with warm lights glowing from the windows. He turned to her, his voice calm. "You're not staying in the main house. This is the guest house. It's empty. You'll be safe here tonight." He said it so simply, so directly, that Sarah's panic softened. He stepped out first, opening the back door to gently lift Lily, still fast asleep, from the seat. He carried her with surprising tenderness for someone who looked so sharp and businesslike. Her tiny arms instinctively wrapped around his neck, her head resting on his shoulder. Sarah's eyes blurred again, this time with something deeper than exhaustion, gratitude mixed with disbelief. Inside the guest house, warmth enveloped them instantly. Soft lighting filled the space, bouncing off polished wooden floors and fresh linens. It smelled like lavender and safety, two scents Sarah almost didn't recognize anymore. Daniel laid Lily gently on a couch, pulling a blanket over her. Sarah touched the fabric almost reverently. It was soft, clean, nothing like the cold concrete and damp cardboard they'd been forced to endure. "You can shower here," Daniel said quietly, pointing to a door down the hall. "There are towels, and the water heater works well." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. The simplest things, water, warmth, a quiet room, felt like luxuries beyond measure. He placed a key on the counter. "Use the whole space, both rooms. I'll have someone bring clothes and groceries in the morning." Sarah stared at the key, stunned. "Why? Why are you doing all this?" she whispered, unable to hold the question back any longer. Daniel took a slow breath, his gaze drifting toward the rain-speckled window. "Because once," he said softly, "a stranger looked at me the way I looked at you tonight, and didn't walk away." His voice carried weight, an echo from somewhere painful in his past. Sarah swallowed hard. Her voice cracked as she said, "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't owe me anything," he replied firmly. "Just rest. When you're back on your feet, help someone else. That's more than enough." Before she could respond, Lily stirred. "Mr. Daniel," she murmured through sleepy eyes. He turned, smiling gently. "Yes, sweetheart. Good night." The simple word melted the man's expression into something warmer than anything Sarah had seen from him yet. "Good night, Lily," he whispered. As he stepped toward the door, Sarah followed him with her eyes. He stopped at the doorway, rain tapping softly outside. He looked back at her, his expression sincere. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. Then he left, pulling the door closed behind him. Sarah stood in the silence, feeling warmth wrap around her like a long, lost friend. She walked to Lily, kneeling beside her, brushing her cheek with soft fingertips. For the first time in weeks, Sarah allowed herself to breathe deeply, allowed herself to hope, allowed herself to imagine that tomorrow might be different. And with that fragile hope glowing like a tiny flame in her chest, she finally let her tears fall. This time not from despair, but from the overwhelming relief that someone had seen her suffering and cared enough to stop.